This is Party Wall Pro, the podcast where surveyors tell you how they first started and how they've grown their business, making it easier for you to get to the top.
Hi, and welcome to another edition of Party Wall Pro, the podcast. Sorry it took me so long to get back online, but we've been very busy with a lot of new customers and also developing a tool for your scheduler conditions. So that we're going to release in a few months, which is quite exciting. So I'm very excited today because I've got Andrew Schofield with me of Schofield Surveyors. And he's agreed to come on the show because I guess, you owed me one, right? So, and so before we dig into the questions, because this time it's a little bit different, I actually went out to our community of users and our mailing list to ask people to ask you questions directly, and we had a ton of responses. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but we'll try to at least talk about the kind of common themes that came through. And so, but first of all, Andrew, so how did you get to where you are? How did you end up in the Party Wall and Neighbourly Matters and all
that? Bit of a checkered background. Not a very nice boy at school. Went to sea when I was 16. Spent 8 years in the Merchant Navy. Went everywhere. Had a thoroughly good time. Met lots of people. Some with negotiable affection. And when I met a girl, came ashore, bummed around, sold brushes door to door, worked in pubs, as a security guard. And then one day I walked past the estate agents where I'd recently bought this flat, and I had a young barrister sleeping on the floor to help pay the rent and everything. And I walked in and said, "Get a job." And like Boys from the Black Stuff, if any of your watchers remember that series, and they looked at me and goes, "Yeah, all right." So I started off as a estate agent, did about 12 months of that, and then decided I want to be an auctioneer. How do you be an auctioneer? Got to be a chartered surveyor. Didn't know any of this, of course. Yeah. And I met an awesome building surveyor by the name of Mike Rutherford, who's just brilliant. And he learnt with him. Went on to Britton Hadley partnership. Then Conrad Ripblatt, as it was in the day, as a senior. Then I started another practice, which I called a day on after 10 years. Went to Delta Patman, was a partner there for nearly 10 years, I think. And then I thought, swan song, want to try and regain a bit of high ground. I felt that building surveying generally, the standards have dropped. Mainly, I think the RICS, since the lay reforms, have changed a lot. And I wanted to start something that was a bit different. I also wanted a different structure to a practice, rather than having, I believe in very much employee owned, you see. So everything, the idea is that everybody has a vested interest in the business. And it's a very transparent organisation, as much as people ask a question about, for example, what I earn, I answer it. There's no hidden secrets about this. And we've got a business plan to build it up to a certain size and structure it for longevity. And it's not for me, the practice really. I've already made the decision. When I'm 65, I resign as director, and they can keep me on as consultant if they're not heartily sick of me by then. Mm-hmm. But that's basically it. It's a bit of a swan song, trying to get a higher ground, a bit more moral, a bit more, as I say, try and get back to the genuine core interests of construction and the inquiry mind that requires.
Mm. And so what's the grand plan? Because I've seen you've managed to poach some young talent.
Poach!
And
I'm so hurt by that. These people come to me. No. They've said we worship at your feet. No, they are. I'm really lucky actually. I've got, I think, the finest surveyors available really, and who are great. They're awesome. I mean, they're load better than I am. Everything with obviously Jack is a tour de force. He's now a mediator. There's everything that goes with it. And Stuart Cobbold, whose background Right of Light, this sort of thing, who I work with them all at Double Platinum. Byron, of course, Foster's trained architect. He's going to double qualify as surveyor too. It's extraordinary. We are producing some really, really good stuff, and we're not the cheapest, not by a long way, but we're trying to get the quality back, not just pile it high and sell it cheap.
Yeah. And so I guess 95% of your work is commercial.
No, I wouldn't think it was actually. No, I don't. I haven't got the breakdown in front of me. I think you'd say, well, when you say commercial, you mean commercial client or commercial property?
Commercial client.
Commercial clients. No, not in terms of fees. I would say 50-60% is what I would describe as commercial client. Yeah. Big residential development, of course, falls into commercial client. But then we do a lot of high-end resi stuff as well. It tends to be mostly where it's gone wrong, or where the owner is nervous and rich and wants a certain thing. That's what it tends to be. Surprisingly, it isn't all adjoining owner, not by a long way. I would say, in fact, a good 40, well, even 50% of our work is building owner. And normally, when you have a practice that's more expensive, you don't tend to get that. They tend to give you more adjoining owner work because, of course, they're under the mistaken belief that the other side will always pay the fees. But not with us. We get parachuted in a lot. We're very fortunate. People have been extremely kind to us as well, other surveyors, and we get recommended a great deal, which is mighty handy because one of the ethos behind the practice is very much that we really only work on recommendation for existing clients. We don't do any advertising. You mentioned yourself, you don't find much about me on the internet, and there's a reason for that. Keep it below the radar.
Yeah. That's quite interesting. So what's the sweet spot then for a practice like yours? Is it high-end residential? Is it big commercial developments?
I think probably, curiously enough, I suppose the sweet spot is the relationship with the legal profession. Because the sort of people we're talking about, they always have lawyers. They all have lawyers, no question of it. And those lawyers will feel if they're recommending practice or putting something forward, which is a lot, somebody they can rely on that's going to give the kind of quality of service they think their client's going to need. So I would say that, we have a good working relationship with lawyers.
All right. Well done. Not always easy.
Hard to believe, isn't it?
Okay, so let's get let's get into the meat of things. So I sent an email around to our community and to a mailing list, people that follow us, and asking them to ask you questions. And you're used to that because you do speak a lot at PNT events and other places. And one of the main thing that came up was you need a notice for the Act to apply and how to invoke the Act. So I'm just going to read out the first one. Can the Party Wall Act be invoked on a dispute between neighbours if the relevant notice has not been served and the works are progressing? In more general terms, does someone need to serve a notice to invoke the Act? So you've got certain views on that. So, please.
Yeah, this is one of these odd ones, actually, where I get the impression that surveyors are fairly united on this. Not entirely, but reasonably. And lawyers are fairly united, but an opposing point of view, which is not usual. Normally, you get a fair spread. I recently had a quite a long exchange. I pulled this off, actually, from my system so I could refer to it. Because two lawyers, both highly experienced in this field, in fact, three of them, Matthew Hearson, Richard Webber, and Nick Isaac, were basically talking about this. And I think it came off the back of the talk that Alice and I gave in central London about a year ago. And he fundamentally disagreed with us, because both Alistair and I agree that the operation of the Act is a process, and you can't dive in and out of it. Really, the Act follows a set process. Now he disagrees completely, and Nick Isaac sort of swayed between the two, but eventually came up with this thing that I think the thought was that under Section 210 that he thought that it said a dispute could be deemed to have arisen. It was this idea, this word deemed, meant that you didn't need a notice. It didn't need to follow any particular event. And I gave this a lot of thought, and I came up with basically the theory that Section 5 follows a direct procedure. I don't know if you want to turn to that. Okay. Because it makes specific reference to notice being served before disputes can arise. Okay? Mm-hmm. And I thought that this made the dispute dependent on dissent or deemed dissent having arisen following the service of a notice.
Yeah.
Okay. Procedure was notice, Section 3 or Section 6, okay, there, followed by dissent or deemed dissent, followed by dispute, okay, followed by appointment. So in other words, it followed the Act. It went notices 1, 3 and 6, then the procedure under Section 5, followed by the appointment under Section 10.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I felt that it was wrong to just pull Section 10 out on its own and just disregard the rest of the Act. It's meant to be read more or less in a sequence.
Yeah.
Okay? As I said, the lawyers I just mentioned don't agree. They think you can just look at Section 10, use that word deemed dissent, and pull it straight out.
And is that because of the spirit of the Act in a whole?
Yeah, it's because they're lawyers. I don't know what it's for. Yeah.
Then the argument of owners would be, well, then I'm not going to serve any notice then, right?
Yeah, I think that's probably right, because they don't need to. And of course, I mean, on Banjo versus Pearson is the case which governed a circumstance where a building owner had served a notice, it had been consented to. Okay, the adjoining owner then said, right, well, your works have caused damage. The building owner basically said, well, you've deprived yourself of using the Act. It's now a common law matter. You will have to sue me for damages.
Yeah.
And Sarah Burr and the other surveyors involved in that quite rightly said no. And they followed the procedure under the Act. I can't quite remember the circumstances now, but I think she tendered forward an appointment for the building owner. They made an award for compensation, which was appealed, and it was held that no, they'd acted correctly and the award was correct. But that's then, it's very important to understand that a notice had been served in that circumstance. So the Act had been invoked. In other words, we've done the first stage of that process I just talked about.
Yeah.
It's been served, it's been responded to, albeit to be consent, you see. But it was held that the Act had been invoked. So my own personal view on that is I believe that you have to have served notice. Now, the next question is, at what stage can notice be served? Well, it has to be served prior to the works being undertaken, because it's about the timing and the manner.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So an adjoining owner discovers that someone has been starting works, no notice. He comes back from a 3-week holiday and he sees that the neighbour has started. What does he do then?
You mean he started work without serving notice, just steamed it? Well, he basically, as well as I did, the way to do that is you seek an undertaking from the owner to cease works immediately, and then any remaining elements can be dealt with under the Act. Any remaining notifiable works can be dealt with under the Act. And if he doesn't do that, you take out an injunction. Now, I'm not for a minute saying that's very fair. I'm saying it puts a tremendous cost burden and risk burden on the innocent adjoining owner. But that's not our problem as surveyors. We don't write the law. We have lords for doing that. And if that's what they see is the way that these things should be done, then I'm afraid we're stuck with it. But that's the way it has to be done.
Yeah.
That's all you can do. But there again, that's the same for every part of civil law, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah. But it is a bit. It's true. It is. As an adjoining owner, I would feel if my surveyor would come to me and say, "Well, actually, all you have to do is go for an injunction," and I'm like, "Well, it's going to cost me a lot." And coming from a building owner, I thought, well, you'll have a lot of building owners that would just say, with this approach, I'm not going to serve a notice, and then it's a whole problem.
I don't get me wrong, Philip. I completely agree with you. The times when I have been involved, where an adjoining owner has decided, no, I'm not having this, and has basically gone for the building owner who has ignored the Act, have always ended up with the adjoining owner getting up right hiding. And I'm talking about far in excess of any damage that the adjoining owner may have suffered. Certainly in terms of costs, I've found that in my experience, the courts are pretty robust about this.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that solicitors quite rightly are cautious when it comes to the matter of injunctions, and they put their clients on good notice of the risks that run with it, of cross undertakings and costs, and all the other bits and pieces that go with it. Not to mention the initial cost, which is anything up to between £5,000 and £10,000 usually. Not to mention that anything that might accrue just to go to trial. But on the few that I have had, the undertaking has nearly always been enough. You don't have to go further than that. A couple of them have gone to injunction, and I have, as I said, in those circumstances, the adjoining owner, properly advised, has come out of it pretty well. Wouldn't necessarily say scot-free. It's probably still cost them something. In fact, that brings us on to an interesting question that you're going to ask me later on, which I'm going to go back to when you get to it.
Yeah. Actually, before we get there, so someone else asked. So okay, building owner did not serve. Works are completed, and damage was caused to the adjoining owner's property. So, what is the correct course of action for the adjoining owner to get their property repaired?
Action in damage is under common law.
Again, yeah, exactly. So
sorry.
So yeah, this is the frustrating part for an adjoining owner in that situation is you're going to have to pay out your solicitor's fees and all that to go and try to get damages. Which so it's exactly the same vein as if you don't serve notice, then the Act won't apply, and so the adjoining owner cannot actually benefit from any protection under the Act, right?
So the Act does, from that point of view, lack teeth. If on the other hand, am I entirely sympathetic to an adjoining owner who doesn't take any notice? And you mentioned the bloke who goes on holiday for 3 weeks. Yes, we all hear this story, okay? But really, it doesn't happen that often. It's mostly people who are, reluctant to spend the money. That's the first thing. Or absentee landlords who don't really keep in contact. That's what it mostly affects. If you are halfway responsible, you will almost certainly get a notification from the planning office if the scheme requires planning permission. You will see the builder turn up on site. You've only got to ask the questions. You know, please give me an undertaking you're not doing any works notifiable under the Act. Please, you know, give me the assurance. Can I see your drawing? Talk to your neighbour. So I'm a bit ambivalent about this as to whether the Act should be beefed up or not, because I do think that people have a responsibility to protect their own interests and not just rely on other people to go out and punish their neighbours.
Yeah, I get it. It's true. Because after all, it's an enabling act, right? So
that's right.
Okay. Anything else you want to add to that before we move on? Do you want to move on to the compensation, to section 7.2?
Yeah, this was a great question. But incidentally, by the way, everybody, the questions you've asked me are really good, and I spent quite a lot of time sort of going back through my records to have a look at this. That last one you just asked me, as I said, I have got exchange of emails, pages about that issue, about the one we just talked about, whether you need to serve a notice or not. And as I said, there was a 2-hour talk on it too. Right, let's go on to this idea of compensation under 7.2. Right, I think.
So the question was, do you want me to just go?
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
For full disclosure, I did send Andy the questions beforehand because I didn't want him to just show up and then be cornered. And it's also because it adds value. So the question was, how far can section 7.2 be pushed? Or how powerful is it? Can 7.2 cover AO rental losses from BO scaffolding being on the adjoining owner's land, for example, subject to section 8 being followed to the letter, of course? So how far can you push it? How greedy can you be as an AO?
Well, the example you gave me is the answer is categorical. Yes, it can. If the adjoining owner suffers a loss as a consequence of access under Section 8 directly related to the exercise of a conferred right, well then, yeah, absolutely. The big problem you get is quite often that loss is very, very small. I had a case in Carlisle Square in Chelsea, which is just so expensive. And the garden at the back of this beautiful Georgian townhouse thing was about the size of a postage stamp. And the next door needs a scan. It was all beautifully laid out, the water feature at the back and everything, but it was very small. The next door needed to erect scaffold, which went right up. And this scaffold filled the yard area. Filled it to the extent you couldn't actually even open the doors from the basement to get into the yard area. There was a standard right outside it. And the building owner was very apologetic. He wasn't doing it deliberately. He'd done the absolute minimum to do it. He cut down the time and all the rest of it. There's no doubt about it. It trashed the garden completely. And I looked at this and I said, well, you can have compensation for this as far as I'm concerned, because you are being deprived of use of your garden throughout the summer, because it needed up there for a few months. So the question then arose is, how do you value that? Now, I'm one of my big strengths is dilapidations, so I'm very conscious of the rules covering damage to reversion, and I think there has to be a demonstrable loss to have a damage, something you can actually put your hat on. Mm. So I phoned around the local estate agent and said, right, if I have this house, beautiful house, blah, 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 and how much would it be worth with a garden, and how much would it be worth without? It's about £25 a week difference. This is Carlisle Square. It's the middle of Chelsea. It was ridiculously small. It bore no resemblance whatsoever to the loss to the owners of not being able to use their rear yard area. So this left me in a dilemma, and I spoke to the other side surveyor, and we agreed that we could use that as a starting point, but then we could enhance it by saying that there was the circumstances where it was their home, it wasn't rented, it had been forced upon them, not whereas a rental person would have had a choice, you see. Mm-hmm. So I felt justify an uplift, and we agreed it all amicably. It went on. So going back to your question, I think it can be stretched to that, where you can show the loss is directly relates to the exercise of a conferred right. So that's no problem. Mm-hmm. Which brings me back to this other thing that I was quite interested in. Whether we talked about an injunction. So along comes the building owner, starts doing notifiable works without having served notice. The adjoining owner takes out an injunction. The court order is that parties will appoint surveyors and resolve matters through award. So the remaining matters, notices served, appoint surveyors appointed, and so on and so forth. Now, do you think in a circumstance like that, with the surveyors could award any shortfall in the costs incurred by the adjoining owner as any loss?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Bear in mind, it's absolutely in the exercise of conferred right because it's the failure to serve the notice required by the Act. I'm quite sure the lawyers would say absolutely not. But it's an interesting idea and certainly one that I would be prepared to entertain. I would say, well, I as a bearer of very little brain, I think that that's worth considering. You know, he's been forced into this position by the actions of a third party exercising a conferred right, okay, who failed to follow the Act. He spent £10,000, he's got £7,500 back, okay, but he's got a £2,500 shortfall. That is any loss or damage. Can't rule it out any way.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm sure lawyers who, I'm sure a lawyer will come back to me, explain to me in gruesome detail why I'm wrong. But I like it. But
you've never actually.
I'm going to carry on.
You've never put that to the test, have you?
I think I may have done once. Actually, yes. I think I did award an adjoining owner £1,000 for that. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But by that time, the building owner was so battered by the entire process. I think they just paid up without demur. But I think I was probably morally right and possibly technically wrong, and I do accept that. But I think that is the strength of surveyors. Be surveyors first and lawyers second. You know, don't get too hidebound by that. Try and do what's right under the Act.
So, and actually, in terms of compensation, what was the kind of the crazy stuff that you had to deal with in terms of adjoining owners asking for X amount just as...
I don't get that much.
No?
No. I ducked that particular one. I imagine the one you're talking about is the Russian one in Belgravia, which my colleague Mr. Redler did, along with just about every other surveyor in London. I think they're on their 13th award now or something. Anyway, I don't. If I'm acting if I'm appointed by an adjoining owner, I think one of the big things, and something I emphasise in my talks, is managing expectation, making sure that they understand that, and I won't get beaten up. I don't take instructions, and I won't do that. So, and there are certain surveyors who are more, perhaps interpret the Act in a different way, and are perhaps more partisan. But I'm not one of them, so I don't get that. If, as a building owner, I've not faced that, mainly because I think possibly I'm a bit more robust. I don't let myself get people make these sort of claims.
Yeah. Well, that's actually a good way to get to the other question of.
Actually, can we go back, because I'm sorry if I'm going on too long. Feel free to edit me out.
No, go ahead.
But one of the things that was asked, I'm going to go back. As I said, I looked through my papers to find out about these sort of things. A few years ago, as third surveyor, I was approached by an adjoining owner. Not common. More common, no, but still very rare to be approached directly by the owner. Because their appointed surveyor, the appointed surveyors really were refusing to deal with the matter. And so he via their solicitor, came to me and referred it to me as a matter of dispute. And it really was an absolute poison chalice. But basically, the referral was, if I can remember, here we go, whether as a matter of principle, the raising of a party wall, which would result in diminishing the light into and the view from a window, can be described as a loss within the meaning of the provisions of 7.2 of the Party Wall, etc. Act 1996. Right. Clause 7.2, the building shall compensate any adjoining owner and any adjoining occupier for any loss or damage which may result to any of them by reason of any work executed in pursuance of this Act. Right, now I should point out that the loss of light was not sufficient to pursue right of light claim. It was a relatively modest loss. I think the main problem was that they had a sort of an office on a half landing with a window that gave them a nice look over everybody else's gardens, and that was going to go down. Right, well, any loss of damage, well, it is any loss, but I concluded, I thought as a matter of principle, the diminution of light and the view arising from the raising of a party wall cannot be described as a loss within the meaning of Clause 7.2 of the Act. That's what I decided. And the reasons were, in respect to this, was the view in the contents of the Act. Of course, it's my opinion that since there's no legal right to a view, there can be no loss. Right? And I went on to say, the Act does not create categories of loss that are not already available in common law. Right? Now, that's... this is my opinion, and I'm quite sure for every lawyer there will be another opinion, but that was mine. I felt that this would be an abuse, and again it came to light, and I said that it is possible for the adjoining owner to have a right of light as an easement, and therefore an injury to this obtained by the undertaking of the building owner's notifiable works would be considered a loss. However, Clause 9a of the Act states nothing in the Act shall authorise any interference with an easement of light or other assessed easements in or relating to a party wall. And that being the case, if it was deemed that the building owner's works notified of the provisions of the Act could result in such interference, then the award concerned them would be ultra vires. So it wouldn't be the loss of that. So, and if the reward is ultra vires, the matter of the loss or damage could not be considered under the provisions of Clause 7.2 because the award wouldn't be viable. Got it? That's what I was getting to. So I think my advice to practitioners would be, when considering any loss of damage, to make sure it does relate to the exercise of the conferred right, and not tripping over some other part of law. As I said, I think this was a rather devious attempt to try and make something that the Act was never supposed to consider, just because the Act is rather loosely worded.
Yeah.
My award was not appealed, by the way. And by the way, I should point out, I felt it was one of those third surveyors awards that it didn't really matter what decision I made. It was going to be appealed. Because it was one of those, one of them was always going to be pissed off.
Yeah.
I'm happy. You can edit that bit out as well.
Because
so, as it happened, they didn't.
It's true. If you weren't taking this approach, you could end up in a situation where, in that office, for example, if it had been, one of those artists that needs and can demonstrate that as a consequence, the quality of his art has diminished. Yeah, can quantify a loss.
There has been a case about that, hasn't there? I think there was a case about how important North Light was to a particular artist.
Oh, really? Yeah, right.
It was. Can't remember what it was now. But
well, that's a good one. Thanks for that. So let's get to another question. Someone was asking, what is the best course of action to take where the adjoining owners are reluctant to dispute, as they do not want to cause trouble and extra cost. However, they're uncomfortable with the works. So it's kind of it's the fine tuning of how you stir an adjoining owner into what direction. Any views on that?
Yeah, brutal. You can't have it both ways. And this, again, is the surveyor's skill to manage the expectation. Well, if you don't want to upset your neighbour or whatever you use, consent. If the Act has been evoked, and if a problem arises again in the future, you can use the Act to determine it. You may be able to use the Act to determine it. But if you're concerned about the works, then dissent. It's just as simple as that. Those are your choices. You can't. You can give conditional consent. Okay, but unless that condition is very gentle, for example, I quite often recommend to people, why don't you just consent? I mean, if I were you, I'd write back consenting, subject to the preparation of schedule condition, because that just protects both of you. All right, or you might want to say, all right, subject to you providing details of how you're going to come in my garden to build the wall, whatever it might be.
Yeah,
You know.
I was going to ask actually the conditions. What kind of condition precedents are there to granting consent? Schedule a condition. That's one of them, and it's more and more common, isn't it?
I'd like to think so. I certainly, on the I get a lot of phone calls from a lot of people, and I do recommend this a lot. I say, well, let's go through the works then. Let's have a chat about it. What are they planning to do? They're doing this, doing that. Okay, let me have a look at the drawing. So I have a look at the drawing and say, well, look, it's only that. Just if I were you, I'd consent. You've got to live next door to these people. Remember, it's no point if you've just dissented from their cutting a pocket to put a steel beam in at a princely cost of £1,200 or whatever for the adjoining owner's surveyor's fee, or even agreed surveyor's fees. They're probably going to be. They're not going to be your best friends anymore. Let's put it that way. And really, was it necessary? That's a good question.
Mm-hmm. Can you? And that was actually my thought, because I'm currently an adjoining owner in.
You're one of them, are you?
Yeah. Is to actually consent subject to me having a say in who they're actually using.
Just hang on 1 second. Can you pause? Sorry, thanks. I've just been delivered a cup of coffee. Thanks, darling. That's my wife, by the way. I don't call my sexy darling. So I'm just going to have a sip of this. I've been talking a long time.
I'm still running.
Thanks very much.
We'll cut that.
Okay. Sorry, you were saying.
Consenting subject to me, the adjoining owner, having a say in who they're going to use as builders. Have you seen that? Oh.
I haven't, but I don't see any reason why you can't. You can put any condition you like.
Yeah, no. Because it's obviously the damage is going to be caused by builders that.
Philip, just a sort of, how are you going to know if the builder's any good or not?
Yeah.
I don't mean that as an insulting way. I just mean it genuinely. How do you know? Half the time we don't. And we do contract work here. And we do a lot to test the builder out. We go and look at their past projects. When they're submitting their tenders, they have to give us certain information. Quite often we ask for testimonials, and that sort of thing goes on. I mean, builders, like any other business, can change overnight because it's so often it's about the individuals involved. And if you're looking at a modest domestic scheme, you're either going to have the chap who's been doing it, who's always done it, in which case you're probably fine, or you're going to find that his particular, the one he's particularly relied on has gone back to Eastern Europe from holiday, and somebody else is involved. So you don't really, it's very limited value, that.
Mm-hmm.
I would always say, probably don't get too involved. It's your neighbour doing the work. So you don't want that excuse, well, you told me who the builder was. You don't want to give him that kind of get out of jail. You want to look at the works, all right, or get me to look at them if you want to, and let's make a value judgment and just see what the impact is on you. What is it like to be? What sort of things are concern for you? Right, things like working hours, for example. Well, local authority govern that, and I can only, a surveyor can only dictate the working hours with respect to the notifiable works, not the whole project anyway. So there's very little point getting too arsy about that.
Mm-hmm.
If it's excavations within 6 metres and it's perpendicular to your property, to your nearest foundation, well, it's only those few foundations that are running out that are of any risk to you. So they're probably only going to be 1 metre wide. So you'll bridge over that without any problem.
Mm.
Obviously, I don't know your house, but if you had a rear addition that stuck out and it was excavating parallel to it, that's a different matter. That you've got to be a lot more careful about. So my advice would always be do a value judgment on the works and keep the conditions reasonable.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so
that's a freebie for you.
Thank you. On the more fun ones, drones. I thought it was a.
Yeah, I did some investigation on this. I went and found out. We do quite a lot of drone surveys.
All right. So the question was, is sending a drone over someone's property a trespass? And if so, what can be done?
Apparently not. Right. It's not a trespass because you can. Well, it's just not. It's something to do with air traffic or something, right? Right. You cannot go over anything within 50 meters, which is not under your control. Okay. So in other words, what you're over, you have to be in control of. So if I've instructed you to do a drone survey of this building, you can do that, and I think you can go over within 50 meters of it. But you can't go, but that has to be in your control. I may have got this wrong, by the way, so do check it out. I've got to get this. And you can also, now...
Control of what? Sorry, so you're saying...
This is a safety measure, by the way. It's nothing to do with trespass. Except for takeoff and landing, where that reduces to 30 meters. Okay. Now, you can get, this is what's applicable to a standard commercially available drone. Okay, you can be licensed to do more intrusive surveys by the CAA, but it's subject to what's called an operational safety case. So that's the health and safety bit of it. The privacy aspect is actually, I believe, your field, data protection.
Yeah.
So my pilot. Sounds every Granfield bloke who stays on it. My techie, okay, his solution is to be very clear about this. He takes off and lands with the camera switched off. So he actually he takes off, goes over the top of the building I wanted to survey, camera on, surveys it, switches off, comes back and lands. So that he's only looking at the bit that I've authorised him to look at, and my client has. It's also, firstly, you should always pre-notify. That was the other thing. So if I've got one in Kingston at the moment, where it's a fight between landlord and tenants, and I will pre-notify the tenants of the landlord's intention. Okay, and it will just be simply like, this is when it's going to be, this is why we're doing it, and I will say about switching the camera on and off and this sort of thing. However, during this period, if you have any concerns, can you please close your curtains? Okay, because you know what it's like. It's not that we'd ever do. I mean, without any interest. You are not allowed to show anything that would allow identity of the individual concerned. So if you fly over somebody, you can't show their face or anything, including such things as cars, for example. And if there are any doubts, then you should be prepared to show the images of what you've taken to the person concerned before you leave the site.
Okay, yeah. And you would anonymize anything that has actually ended up on your film by mistake, right?
Yeah, well, I think mistake would be, obviously, I think cock-ups happen.
Yeah.
That's the general guidance. And the chap who does it for me he's ex diplomatic police protection. So it's very useful for me because I had to do some big surveys in some of the embassies down in Holland Park, and I need to do flyovers there. And of course, it's actually surrounded by embassies, and we were able to get the consents to do it. I'm very lucky. I think he was probably about the only bloke who would have managed it.
Wow,
because we had good contact. Yeah.
So the trespass point is no trespass.
No, I don't think it's trespass.
Okay.
No, but as I said, not really about party wall. I know I do boundaries, but it's not. I don't think it is.
One.
I think you get a. It's something to do with exemption or something that air traffic get or something. Anyway, there you go.
Yeah, but I guess it depends on the height of the airspace between the building and. I don't know.
Yeah. Good question. Stick the party wall, eh? Got a sporting chance then.
Nearly time to go. So the last.
Sorry,
so someone asked the question about the faculty. So I thought that's brilliant.
Yeah, it's poison chalice. And again, I gave this one a lot of thought.
Your views on what added value the faculty of Party Wall Surveyors has brought to the professional and process. So I guess you, as a member of the P&T Club, are you a member of the faculty or not?
I'm not. I think I should sort of qualify this firstly. There's a big misunderstanding about P&T. The P&T is a club and a learning society. It's there to encourage the pursuit of excellence in the administration of the Act. That's it. It doesn't have formal complaints, doesn't have disciplinary. We have a protocol we expect people to adhere to, and if they don't, what happens is we just don't renew their membership. But it is educational. The faculty is a trade organisation. It's as simple as that. It basically has members practicing in a certain field. I believe, again, I'm not a member, so I don't exactly know, but I presume it has complaints and disciplinary procedures that are set out. And of course, its prime role is to promote its members, so that being a member of the faculty will give you a commercial advantage. And I think, in truth, certainly outside London, it probably does. I have personal views about the perceived value versus the actual value of membership. But I think that a lot of people do put weight about being able to display membership of organisations against their name as displaying a certain amount of competence and governance. In terms of actually improving the administration of the Act, I think the answer is probably not. And I don't mean that necessarily in a negative way, because I think the actual individual members probably have benefited. But by doing it, they have a lot more people are involved, and I think that they are, whereas previously, if perhaps the Act would have been administered by, shall I say, people with a better knowledge of construction than they are now, because of course the term surveyor is not defined in the Act. I think there are certain things the faculty do really well, really, really well. I think where their individual members organise the forums, I think they've been done very well. On the whole, I've enjoyed speaking at them when I've been invited, and it's lively discussion. I think, as I say, in terms of advancing knowledge and improving the performance of practitioners administering the Act, I am less convinced that they have done quite so much. I think that the P&T Club needs to stand from that point of view.
Yeah, okay. So maybe I'll have to have someone from the faculty come and
yeah, I'm sure. Yeah,
defend.
As I said, I should. I mean, there's a certain amount of jiving that goes on between the two organisations from time to time, which is water off the duck's back, really. I mean, people have a go at me all the time, but I don't think it's. So they are different. One is a trade organisation, and we're not. So I think to muddy the waters and say there's a rivalry between us on that basis is misleading, because we do different things.
Yeah, no, that's true.
I don't personally see the need to be a member. I'm a fellow of the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors, building surveyor. I don't see the need to say anything else. In fact, I would go as far as to say I'm not a part of the Royal Surveyor. Never have been, never will be. I'm a chartered building surveyor, and I have all the necessary skills to do that and a lot more.
Yeah. Well, that's a good thing to finish on. So, anything else you would like to add? Any other?
No, it's been great. I thoroughly enjoyed doing it. Thank you very much for your time. It's a great question.
Thank you. I've got a whole list. So, one of the questions I always ask is who should I invite to come for an interview next? I actually interviewed Sarah a long time ago, but the quality of the video was so poor that I have to do it again. So you mentioned Sarah in your case, so I've got to get in touch with her again. Who else?
Right. You don't just want people, pontificating like I've been doing. I think you need something that's a bit more, see the other side of the coin, perhaps from other people who feel differently. Perhaps you want to try people who are very notorious, perhaps, might be the answer. Might be interesting, I don't know.
Who, sorry? You cut.
I was going to suggest you might want to select a surveyor or somebody who's rather notorious.
Mm-hmm.
Get their point of view. One surveyor I had to be involved in I said we don't have disciplinary procedures, but in a disciplinary matter within the P&T club. He accepted the criticism that was levied at him, and he said, "Look, I accept it and all the rest of it. The trouble is that people who come to me because they know that I am that kind of person, that I am going to be the kind of person who makes trouble if I can. And that's why they come to me."
I think you're talking.
And I kind of got that too, because what he did was he didn't do anything wrong. He was just very unhelpful. For example, he would deliberately not consent. He would deliberately withhold consent to special foundations, delay and delay and delay, prevaricate, always giving the indication. Oh yeah, he'll give the consent. And then right at the death, he'd turn around and go, no consent. Oh, we can give you consent, but it's going to cost you 50 grand. That sort of thing. Mm. Which, okay, I'm a big believer. I always tell people, don't ever rely on it. Don't do that. If they're not just said yes, work on the basis they're going to say no. You are better. So really, however much you like it or not, the building owner's surveyor was wrong, not the adjoining owner. So the adjoining owner's surveyor didn't do anything wrong. He just played the act. And anybody who says we should apply the act in a non-partisan manner, oh, come on. You're appointed by an owner to apply it. You're not there to educate the other side. If an adjoining owner doesn't ask for Section 1111, it is certainly not appropriate for the building owner's surveyor to suggest it to him. That's not the job at all. You're there to determine disputes, not to make them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think perhaps somebody like that might be interesting to talk to. Surveyors who I have a huge amount of respect for and they don't agree with me on lots of things. Stuart Birrell, Jerry Poole, Michael Kemp, of course, with the education side of the P&T. These are P&T members I've mentioned, who are all I would describe as eminent. And as I say, there is not one of the great things that certainly about P&T, and I'm sure we do not agree about everything, not by a long way. What usually happens is we talk about things and they decide that I was right, and we call it a day. But
okay, perfect. Well, I'll reach out to those. Also, if you are watching this interview, if you would like to drop me an email at pw@partywallpro.com, you'll see the email at the bottom of the screen. Feel free to send me an email with any suggestions, or if you want to be interviewed, or if you have any good questions I can put forward to my next interviewee. That would be really helpful. Andrew, thank you so much for your time.
It's been a pleasure, Philip.
Good having you, and have a good afternoon.
Thanks ever so much. Lovely to talk to you.